a conversation with our visiting intern from German, Jule Welling. It's an interesting conversation that we thought we should have and share with you as artists, just to see how we can create these connections that we're creating as an institution. How do we document and archive our works? Because some of the things that as artists sometimes we have a challenge with. Some are doing it, some are not doing it, but we feel that sharing this information is very important for the young and upcoming artists. Even some of our senior artists, perhaps maybe the records have since been lost, or the methodology or the form of documenting and conserving at that time has changed with what it is now. But how do we keep up with the trends? How do we stay informed? And how do we know how to manage all those things because learning is a continuous process that we do daily. So this is our platform to learn and grow, share and interact. I'm sure she's here to share and learn as well from us as well, so that when she goes back to Germany, she's also carrying Zimbabwean culture, art and heritage that she can share based on this interaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to see you all. My name is Jule. Some of you might know me, some of you don't. I'm here with the gallery for 6 weeks. I'm an intern, kind of, and I study art history in Germany. So we thought it would be a good idea to share my experience, just to talk a bit about my studies. Please forgive me before. English is not my mother language, so please forgive me for looking at my notes for some of the things. So I'm hoping that we can have like more of an interactive conversation. So I'm starting to give a little input of my studies and my focus of studies, and then it would be nice to just chat with you a bit, and I would also be really interested into your opinions and to see what you think about these topics, and I think we can have like a really interesting chat about it. So yeah, so like I said, my name is Jule. So I wanted to start this conversation with a question for you, because you're all here because you're kind of interested in art, you're familiar with the art. So I want you to think, what artists do you know outside of the National Gallery? Just think about it in your head. It would really be interesting to me, because when I thought of these questions, like what artists do I know, that's a question that I asked myself during my studies a lot, because we mostly taught about artists. So I was thinking about it, and it's mostly male artists that we study and learn about in my studies. So when I went to the library, mostly of the books that I saw were from European male white artists, so-called great artists. But I was asking myself this question, like, why is it like that? What makes an artist a great artist, and why are there mainly male white European artists when you look back at the art history that we are taught? When I was searching for some books in the library, there were so many books of European great artists, so it really got me thinking. So I wanted to share my own experience here. I study art history at the University of Münster in Germany, and I'm about to finish my bachelor degrees. So when we study art history in Germany, we divide history in 4 periods: Middle Age, Renaissance, Baroque, modern art. And only in the last period, the percentage of non-male white European artists increases significantly. So it's not because there have not been great women artists, for example, or black artists in our history, but it's because they have not been acknowledged in art history. And that's also what Linda Nachlin is talking about. I don't know if you continue the slides. I don't know if some of you know her book. She's an American feminist art historian, and she did research on the underappreciation of women artists through art history, and she raised consciousness regarding the way history is looked at. In her most famous essay, which is "Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists?" She states that there are no great women artists, not only because they were forgotten in history, but because of unequal training available to women in the world's art institutions. And it affected the way art history was researched, analyzed, and also taught up until now. So even though art history books are mostly talking about male artists, there have been in fact many great women artists as well in our history. I just brought a few of the examples that about the women artists that I learned about in my art history studies. So yeah, I don't know if you know some of these, but for example, Sophie Angulissola, she was a late Renaissance painter and best known for her portraiture. And she's one of the first known female artists that you can read about, that her history was actually documented. Angelika Kaufmann was also a painter in the early neoclassical style, and she was influenced by French Rococo, and she's known for her decorative wall paintings for residences mostly. Paula Modersohn-Becker, which is the third picture, she was a German painter and a leading female figure in the post-impressionist and expressionist movement. And also Olga Merson, she was a Russian painter who mostly worked in Germany and also in France. And she's one of the examples of women who lived under the shadow of her fellow male painters as well, because in books she's mostly named in the context of Henri Matisse. I think most of you know this name, and she was working close with him also, and she didn't really get the same attention like her male colleague did. So yeah, just to give you a few examples of great women artists who fought their way into the art history and into the documentation of art history as well. But now there's the question, like, why didn't they get the same appreciation and attention as their male colleagues? Because even though some of them, they worked even really close together, they did not get the same attention. And in the history books, they're not getting the same space to write about their history as well. And yeah, it's because there has been a long period of exclusion in art history for several reasons. There have been gender-specific and origin-specific living and working conditions in our society and in our history as well. And there still are. And not only in a few countries, but in an international consciousness as well. And furthermore, there was also reinforcement of the exclusion of non-white and non-male artists during the institutionalizing of art history as an independent academic discipline in the late 19th and 20th century, in Europe especially. And even though academics, there have been art schools since the 16th century, starting in Italy. The first time a woman was allowed to study at an art academy in Germany, it was in 1908. So nearly 400 years later, a woman was accepted at an art school since they existed. So it really keeps you thinking about the reasons behind that. And that's actually where gender studies are coming into picture, because they're dealing with questions about gender differences, hierarchies, power, the construction of gender roles, and it gives impulses to reflect on the norms of our society nowadays, also on the past societies as well. And this does not only affect women as artists, but also female art critics and curators as well. For example, I learned about Peggy Guggenheim. She was one of the few examples of women who established a name in the early art industry. She's an American art collector and an important patron of the abstract expressionist school of artists in New York City. And she opened a gallery called Art of the Century in New York, which was a great success. And she supported many known painters as well, for example, Jackson Pollock. And up until now, the Guggenheim collection in New York contains many masterpieces as well, modern paintings, and is also still on display in Venice as well. These established gender norms throughout history also affect the way women are depicted in artworks, because women have always been motives of arts in our history. When we look back in art history books, we see pictures. There are women all over in paintings, but I just brought a few of the examples. You see, when you look at art history, women have always been the topic.
but their focus was on their beauty and their appearance most of the time, and they were depicted in a certain way based on their gender especially. And it brings up questions about stereotypes of femininity, questions of identity, for example, and gender roles, physicality, sexuality. Females were rarely depicted in public spaces as well because they simply had no access to such public spaces because society didn't really allow them to. One of the examples that I also brought is Mary Cassatt. I don't know if some of you know her work. She's an American Impressionist painter and a printmaker, and she depicted mostly the intimate lives of contemporary women, especially in their role as caretakers. And she actually did not shy away from painting a realistic depiction of women. She did not only focus on their beauty, but she seen them in a context of society as well. And she addresses the challenges for women living in specific gender roles. And Mary Cassatt established a very modern approach at her time, actually. And this was 150 years ago, and it's still an issue and the topic in our art today as well. Also, female artists exhibiting their work in galleries or museums was rare at that time. Up until now, many females are still fighting for their way into a gallery space. The Guerrilla Girls, they actually were talking about this specific topic, and they addressed this topic in their art projects as well. The Guerrilla Girls, they are an American anonymous artist activist group, actually, and they expose gender and ethnic bias in art, in film, and also in politics. And this is probably their most famous poster. I think some of you have seen it before. And they address the stereotypical depiction of female nudity in art and simultaneously exclusion of female artists' works in gallery spaces. So not only sexism, but also racism is visible in the art history. If you look back in our history, see that the Eurocentrism since the Renaissance also reflects in the modern arts as well. I can count on one hand how many black artists were part of our seminar during my studies. So it really gives us some questions. This applies also to people from the LGBTQIA+ community as well. I actually did an essay and studied a bit more about Barbara Hammer. She's an American film and video artist, and she really... I don't know. Sorry, the Zoom is connecting again. Sorry for the disruption. Barbara Hammer, I studied about her in my studies because I was interested in it, not because it was a part of a seminar, but because I thought I cannot just study one side of art history. So she is an American film and video artist, and her initial works emerged within the context of the feminist avant-garde. Since the 70s, feminist ideals and her experience also as a lesbian artist have influenced her work mostly. And in her art, she engaged with themes such as nudity, femininity, and also embodiment, which are the main topics that she addresses in her art. And she addresses topics that are taboo in most of places in society and often don't find space for discussion, which she criticizes also in art history. And if you want to see her works, most of her works you can also see online. So this was also her kind of documentation of her works. I can give you the link also later if you're interested in it. And as you see, it's not only an issue in Europe, but also spread through American art history as well. So it's an international topic. There have been long-standing and still ongoing processes that are improving the situation and trying to reflect on these norms, which have been fixed throughout our history, since such a long time. And if you look back in our history, there have always been movements like this, like the Global Women's Movement, for example, in the 70s. In the 70s, a big part of that was Judy Chicago, for example. She's one of the known people to name in this context. She is an American feminist artist, and
Her complex installations have shaped the women's liberation movement in the 70s and beyond that especially. And in her art she inspired many young female artists as well. So one of her most famous works that you see on the right is The Dinner Party. She addresses the lack of appreciation of females in the teaching of art history. So in her work The Dinner Party, or in her installation, the triangle table displays unique place settings for 39 women that she thinks are not acknowledged in our art history. And she also displays pottery that have long been associated with women and been undervalued in art especially. But even nowadays, artists are still trying to break these norms that have been fixed in our history and established for so long. Just to name some examples. Some of you might know her as well. Njideka was a Nigerian-born visual artist working and living in Los Angeles in California right now. And she draws on her experiences in her work and addresses the challenges of combining these two parts of her cultural identity. So women are mostly in position of power in most of her works. And her closeness to her home country, Nigeria, shapes her work as well. And she is a known advocate for female artists and an example for how differences and how individual experiences can actually shape an international art platform. The second artist that I want to tell you about, it's Afroscope. He's an artist and a designer from Ghana, and his art is often rooted in diversity of African worldviews. And his work have been his works often have a kind of surrealistic leanings with Afrofuturist undertones. And in his work he deals with topics like colonial programmed norms or education, religion, also selfhood as well. And these are just some of the examples and some works, and the list goes on and it grows every day. And I hope it grows every day. So you can say that art has the ability to move things within our society, and individual artists have been and still are trying to put themselves out there to fight for their rights and for their acknowledgement. And they have the goal of turning away from a specific simplistic art world dominated by mostly male and white art history, and they want to show that the art and the artists are diverse. And a very important part of this is the documentation of this kind of diverse art world. It doesn't matter. So this starts with every little artist because you know words have power and words can educate. So it doesn't not depend on the form of documentation that you use. If it's a book, if it's social media, if it's online kind of website or blog. If you're not telling the world about the diversity, how will history ever be rewritten? So this is not going to work until we write our own history. So art institutions also need to follow this path as well, because they have the power to address a wide range of people and to help artists also to overcome little obstacles and as well, and they have the power to help every little artist to write their own history, because we are writing our own history right now, and we also have the ability to design it however we want it to look like. So we have to use all our power to do something, because otherwise history will not be rewritten. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I encourage you to ask questions. I don't know. I would also be very interested into your comments, because this is kind of my focus of studies. But you know, education and learning is never over. So I really want to also hear about your opinions on this topic. So feel free to discuss, ask questions, comments. Yeah, thank you. Just feel free to speak. We're not in school, so.
I I think I don't know, it's a combination of both, a comment and a question.
Okay.
So with the information that you've gathered from your learning and being here, knowing that art is mainly dominated by men, would you then say that the women that are currently leading are good enough, or it's simply because they were brave enough to just, push the boundary? Would you say the art that is there being led by the women that are known is good enough?
I wouldn't say that it's even about being good enough, because if you look at not only art history but history himself, like, it's not only that it's that people don't have the ability to do the same, or women don't have the ability to do the same as men, but if you look at history, they just, in most parts, they did just not have the same opportunities. They were not giving the same rights. So we're still in a process of giving women the same rights as men, and it's not only in our society, but it's also in art. So women are still fighting for their way into art spaces, not because they are fighting to get better at art, but they're fighting to change this kind of system. So I would say every woman artist is good enough to be a great artist like Matisse, and of course these guys, Michelangelo, all these great artists, they were all really talented. But there were also in history really talented women, but they just did not get the same attention, not because they weren't good enough, but because society didn't see them as men. So I don't know if this answers your question, but yeah.
Mine is a question on why do you keep on saying women have no maybe place in the arts? It's a simple question. Maybe you'll elaborate on that.
Mm-hmm. Because place, you can also define place in many different ways. So place, for me, when I say that, I mean the non-private parts of our society, so the public, like, for example, gallery places, but also bars to go to events. Simply, if you look at history, like, I can just talk about my own studies, about the history that I am taught, which is mostly European history, actually. So that's also why I'm here, to study, to learn more about history, because I study art history and not European art history. So, but I feel like it was just that women were not seen in this kind of spaces, not only in art, but just in general in our society. Women were not allowed to go to bars the way that men were allowed to. Women were not allowed at football games like men were allowed to. These kind of spaces, that's just what I mean. Like, maybe it's a bit over dramatic, but that's kind of these places that I mean. And it's the same with art spaces as well, like galleries. Like, most of the exhibitions that have been, like, at the beginning of art history, when the art history really started, have just been men painters who exhibited their work. Like, the percentage of women in art exhibitions at the start of art exhibitions were like close to zero. It was really, really a short percentage. And that's also what I meant with women getting accepted into art schools. It took 400 years for one single woman to get accepted into an art school. So, and the process is still not over, it's still going on. So, yeah, that's kind of what I meant with that. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was looking at it as another point of view.
Yeah.
Looking at women, even way back, art history has been in many ways. Pottery is part of that, crocheting, knitting, part of art, basket making. But unfortunately, maybe documentation and sometimes our traditions and cultures didn't have the opportunity to bring that.
I think that's a really important point to say, because documentation is the key. Because when we study about art history, we just study about the things that we can read about. Because where should we get this information otherwise? We can read about it in the internet, we can read about it in the books, and this is the kind of history that we can learn about. So that's also why it's so important to now document every artist's history, because in the future, people who study art history, they will study about this time right now, and we can decide now what they are going to read about. So I think that's really important. That it was also a big point that you do not find many women in art history books. If you look at the 17th, 16th century, there were not many women, not because there have been no artists, female artists, but they just didn't get a space in the books. So yeah, that's a bit. But yeah, you're right. There have always been female artists also with doing pottery, doing crafts. But I think when art history also got institutionalized, like galleries opened, the first exhibitions started, this kind of crafts and arts that women were doing was also not really acknowledged the way that paintings were, because when the first exhibition started, I think in Europe it was mostly in Paris, which was like a big scene where exhibitions started. There were not many potteries or something like this in the museums. There were big paintings, like by Henri Matisse, by these great male artists, but pottery didn't find the way because it didn't really got the appreciation like the big paintings did. Yeah.
I think I'd also maybe like to comment on, yes, women were in art history in the sense of crocheting and all of that. But then when you look at our history, and specifically if you look at gender roles that were defined by society, even if a woman did crochet, it wasn't in the sense of she's making art. It was in the sense of she's doing this so that she can put food on the table. She's doing this so that she can sell and, make her a way to live, but it wasn't looked at as art. So I think that's what she meant as the women did not have a space within the art industry, because even when they did do art, it wasn't necessarily regarded as art at the time. So now that we're changing that, we're changing the gender roles, we're redefining all of that, we can find women in art spaces. A woman can find herself doing pottery and crochet, not because she wants to, not because it's a gender role that's defined to her, but because it's a talent that she has and she wants to share it with the world as art.
I think it's good what you say, because it's a difference between making art, or if we talk about art industry, like art being really acknowledged as art. So there's more art than just paintings, like, yeah.
There's a word that we keep on bringing on, redefining. So let's refine. Now let's refine, not redefine. Okay, let's redefine and refine. The word art. What is art? What is art? Because sometimes we have a problem whereby when we concentrate on the word art, we look at painters, painters as the people that are called artists. We look at sculptors as the people that are called artists. But when we look at work that maybe is done by others, like little work, like beadwork, pottery, say, and any other small item, like for example in Bulawayo, we've got places like the City Walk. We have people who sell their crafts, the Thames crafts. So the school we went to was called Mzilikazi Art and Craft Center. And Mzilikazi Art Center, now we are to try and differentiate the two, between art and crafts. What's the difference between art and craft? And when in art, when we're talking about women without the art that we're talking about, what kind of art do we really want to see women getting into, which is really said to be art?
Maybe that's a good question. I don't know if I can answer your question really, because I can give the question back to you. What is art? I mean, that's a really big question, and I think many people would answer it in many different ways. For me, art can be so many things, because if you look at art history also, art has changed. The definition of art has changed. There have been so many medias that are here now that have not been there 200 years ago. So, for example, video art. It's also a kind of art form that has not taken a whole lot of, has not been there like 300 years ago. So art changes, and art will always keep changing. The mediums of art will always keep changing, but I think the answer, the question is, what are we going to show in the art institutions? Like, what is getting space in the art world, in the art, in like what is going to sell, for example, like the art, how do you call it? The art business, kind of like. I think there's a difference between the art medias getting their way into really the art world, because if you look at video art, for example, it's not going to sell for like $1 million like a famous art painting does, but it's just because people don't value them equally. And I don't know if you can change it just like that, because history has been going on for so many years, and it will continue for so many years. So it's difficult to just say, oh, we're going to change our way of seeing things. It's not going to happen like this. It takes time. It's a long process. But I think with communications and talks like this, and if we reflect on this kind of topics, we can spread this reflection and be a part of this process also. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question to do with Peggy Guggenheim. She's a lady, and you're majoring subjects like subject matter in one of your collection. Like the documentation, they're all ladies and women. And do you really look at other men who painted women's subjects? Like, for example, getting more into the detail of the womanhood instead of like, I'm a woman, the kind of thing. So, do you look at that, or you just focus on women only and their paintings?
No, I think you cannot look at women only, because men are part of the society. I don't want to just overlook men. That's not the thing. So we all have to reflect on these topics, women as well as men, because otherwise it will not work. And because in art history there were so many men who painted women, I think we have to reflect on this also. And I think it's good if a male painter also is painting women and reflects on their situations. But I think it's necessary to not only talk about them, but talk with them. It does make sense, because you always have to kind of get into a communication about why you're painting this and why are you depicting it the way you're depicting the woman in this situation. I don't know if that's kind of the thought that I have, because of course I also look at male painters, at male artists, video artists as well, because there are many male artists who also talk about women, who talk about sexism, who talk about racism. So it's also important, I think, to acknowledge these ones. But the reason why I was talking a lot about women artists, because I wanted to show some examples of women who fought their way into documentation also. These were women that you can actually research and you can actually read about them, because there are not, if you look at the 15th, 16th century, there are not that many. So I think it gets better now. We're still in the process of trying to document, even as women, even as colored people. Like, but yeah, that's why I was talking a lot about women.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, what I've actually realized, I'm one of those artists who have been painting, I think now for about 40 or 45 years. And what I've learned in most cases is that you are talking about the documentation, which is key, which is one of the major aspects of the letdown of other artists, whether male or female. I think to begin with, in the olden days, art was not taken really seriously because people who used to do art, you could not do art in order to live, but just like for pleasure, just for enjoyment. But as time went by, when some of us took over, we realized that you can make a very good living out of art. So we took art as a profession. And we have learned that along the way, what has been the major challenge has been to market your art. As an artist, in most cases, you tend to concentrate on production, the production part of it, which you mean you just want to sit down and work. And then, but the major letdown is the marketing aspect of it. I think that is where now the component of maybe we have some women who have been painting. For example, like here, she's sitting in front of me. She has been painting for quite a long time, but now that most of these women's work has not been shown here and there in most cases, it makes them not be seen that they are the women who also paint. But however, it is also important that women also should stand up and be serious about art. I don't know on their part what could be hindering them. But as of us men, I think the major letdown is the way we market our art. Or we have been marketing our art. But these days, the trend has changed. Now there is this and that which can be used to market art, and then people can be seen to be doing something. Then they could be visible. They could be seen that they are there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I also think that the hindrance is that most of the published books need to be authenticated or citation from popular people. So sometimes it hindered artists from writing their own art history. For instance, self-taught artists, they are just coming from somewhere where they are not even known, but they are actually practicing artists. And that in itself, when a bookshop or somewhere where they want to place their book, then they will be told, who are you? Do you know Votitebe? Or do you know Tanisile Fest? If you don't know them, then you are not an artist or you are not worth it. So those are some of the challenges that I've realized from the artists, why they are also shying away from writing. And also the lack of taking up the professionals to do the work for us. Like for instance, we have this company which is here, recording and everything. Most of the arts, I want to paint, I also want to be the photographer, I also want to be the writer, and everything in one person. That's some of the hindrances that we are finding in recording our own artworks and artists, and also consulting actually the gallery. That whom do you know who can help me to do my publishing of my books or publishing of my artworks? That is the challenge we are facing, and we really need to look at it and change how we handle our artworks. If I make a sale have I photographed my work before it is being taken by the client? Or I'll just say, oh yes, I used to paint like this, but it was bought, I can't remember it had flowers, it is purple. So that's the history that we are hearing, that I used to have in artwork, but I don't have it anymore and I don't know where it is. So yeah, it's important to document.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I think as an artist, I'm having a challenge of marketing my work. Right. Who do I talk to? Where do I go? Of course, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, but sometimes it's not enough. So the challenge of wanting, like you've got your work, is amazing, but then you don't have people seeing it, you know? And then sometimes when you create your work, you feel like, I'm not selling, like I'm not making what I feel like my artwork is worth. So that ends up becoming a disadvantage. It discourages you to continue going. So you end up thinking, okay, you know what? Let me just leave this art thing and let me focus on something that's going to get me money, month-end, right? So now it becomes a problem because people are no longer going to see the skill that you have, or the ideas that you have, the stories you want to tell through your artwork. So, for instance, for me, it took me a while to say I'm an artist, like to publicly say I'm an artist, that's what I do. Why? Because art in Zimbabwe is not seen as something respectable in terms of money making. Artists in Zimbabwe are known as people that are not making much money, or people that are starving. Starving artists is what people call them. So it's tough being an artist in a country where art is not as appreciated. You know, you do your exhibitions, you do your shows, but then when it comes to people buying your work, they can't afford to buy your work because people they'll rather buy mini mill or pay ZESA or pay rent or stuff like that because they can't afford. They say this is really nice, but then I can't afford to buy your work. So what then do you do? It's so discouraging as an artist, and then you think, okay, maybe let me just choose something else. So yeah, that's the issue that I have right now as an artist.
Yeah, it's really understandable. I think many artists can relate to that. For me, I feel like it's always good to have clear communication. You're not the only artist who has these struggles, who has these thoughts. I think it's always helpful to talk to other artists about it, because there are experienced artists. There are experienced artists, also Zimbabwean artists who have done exhibitions. I think you can really learn a lot from each other when you just find the communication about their own experiences. Maybe they have tips, maybe they have help how to get yourself down out of a mental block or this frustration time. So I think it's always good to learn from each other, to study about each other, to learn from each other's experience. Because there have been successful, experienced artists, Zimbabwean artists, who are working with the gallery also. So I think this kind of talks, this is also really helpful to, I don't know if it's if that's relatable, but yeah.
Is it on?
Yeah, it is.
Right. I think the other thing also that contributes, especially on the side of women, getting into the arts, it's our culture, our way of doing things. Right? Culture usually sometimes doesn't allow women to be much more into arts. Therefore, now that we are rewriting our history and women are jumping into the wagon, it's okay, it's good. And as she was saying, it's not easy. It's not an easy walk to freedom. I must say that. But now in the arts also it's not easy. The way we work with women in collaborations, you can see that. I remember one time when I was actually working with women in Maswingo, doing basketry. Right? They were concentrating on their basketry. Right? But I came in with a fellow artist from France, trying to help these women to sort of become very much artistic in their work, whereby they were writing sign language in basketry. So I was there also to control them when this fellow artist had gone. So art really, they have to, one way or the other, change the way of doing things, the normal way they used to do, and also get into the latest, which was the introduction of art to their work, even though their work was also art or craft. So women also have to get into, or get out of the cultural way of doing things normally, and also fuse, and give themselves time. They have to have time to really work in this art industry. Art industry is just a tough place to be in. Yeah, but fortunately, I'm happy to see a lot of young women who are coming in, and they're doing it well. But unfortunately, as you say it again, it's a game. It's a game. I think it's kind of a little political because women also, they come with their own packages, and their package challenges men. And men, when they're challenged, you know, there's a term whereby they say, this world is only run by men. But men forget that without the women also, they can never run this world. So you all need each other. So if we support women, in the field of art, I think the world will be better.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's not only about the arts. Things are not going to change in the art if society doesn't change. And I think it's really interesting that you use the word normally, that women have to get out of this normal things, because what even is normal? Like, why are things like seen as normal? Because history was like that for so long, and now things are normal. But we can change normal. Like, it doesn't have to stay like this. It doesn't have to stay that women always have to stay home and take care of the children, and they're not allowed to have a hobby or a good, successful job. Like, we can change the normal. What even does normal mean? Like, yeah.
To answer my fellow sister here, I think as an artist, where we fail, when you make your sale, you use up all your money. But if you treat your art as a business, then you'll know that you have to have multiple streams of income. So from the little art that you sell, create another income, and another income, and another income, and another income. Then you won't be a starving artist. And in terms of portraying our message or getting the word out, I think the current trend that is there is performance art. You'll see from the Gorilla Girls from Banksy, performance art is the voice that is currently being used. So as artists as well, I'd encourage that we adapt to the times. Painting was a form of a voice that was being used in the 1800s. So now let's adapt to the current art that is making the message known and heard. Yeah.
For the ladies, I think you have to be normal if you want to be in the art industry. What I'm trying to say is artists we are really like known as abnormal. So if you're coming to the industry, you have to be abnormal. If you start to like understand that, you know what I mean to be abnormal. You have to be abnormal.
Okay, the last question. Okay. No, it's not a question, but I just wanted to add on to what Shami said. Sometimes we also, we tend to overlook that there's something called funding out there. So it's not easy, of course. You can use your social media, you can use your Instagram, you can use your TikTok, but also try as hard as possible to search for, there are some organizations that actually fund artists. Search for funding, search for scholarships, search for, if you are really, really passionate about what you're doing and you really put in your all, something will give at some point. It's just that sometimes we give up very easily, but funding is out there for artists as well.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I would like to, as one of the senior artists, I would like to thank our visitor here and the National Gallery, the director, and everybody else involved in art, and you all who managed to come today. This is good, and this is part of what we need to do, to always go interact like this. It's good for art, it's good for us all. Thank you very much.
I can just agree. Thank you so much for coming. I really liked the discussion. It was really interesting as well. That's all I wanted to say. You can use the mic. Yeah, really, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for quite insightful discussion that we had here. It is quite important, sure, to document everything that we do, because a future generation is coming and they need to know who is Janet. They need to know Lovo, they need to know Wazanweti. Yes, actual documents. And we also want the authors to help us out to write these documents, because like what we say, it's very difficult for an artist to be in the studio as well as be the writer of their own artworks. But like we are saying, we also do not want to be the sun painters. They are not known, but they just said, oh, they did paintings on the rocks. But who painted that? No one knows. So it is quite important. Thank you very much, Yula, for your time and giving this all research that you have done for us. Thank you for coming, and again, clap hands for everyone.